Sudden flood hits Heilongjiang, villagers flee wearing shorts, it is their all possessions. Expert warns, the CCP will release floods from all sectors onto the Chinese people. The Chinese government helpless amid economic decline, the immobile money printing machine. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Sudden flood hits Heilongjiang, villagers flee wearing shorts, it is their all possessions. In the beginning of today's news broadcast, we continue to cover the current rainy and stormy weather conditions in China. According to Xinhua, China's official news agency, torrential rains have struck Heilongjiang province due to the impact of Typhoon Kanan. As of 8 a.m. on the 11th, a total of 10 rivers in Heilongjiang have surpassed their danger levels. Moreover, 3 small reservoirs are operating beyond their flood control capacity, and all-out efforts are being made to discharge excess water. On the 11th, a sudden flood hit Deduchuan village in Dongning City, Heilongjiang. In response, many villagers had to evacuate quickly, leaving behind all of their belongings. As the floodwaters began to recede on the 12th, a video from Phoenix News showed that the village's houses remained immersed in water. A wide array of debris could be seen floating in the water. In the video, a man dressed in shorts and without shoes ventured into the water, trying to access his house and search for any salvageable items. Another villager described how the floodwaters surged in with remarkable speed, submerging the area in a matter of minutes. Public opinion has cast doubts on whether the abrupt flooding in Dongning could be linked to flood releases. A villager captured a video showing the river in Dongning's Deduchuan town rising rapidly. It's a disaster, the Unity River is overflowing. We need to evacuate fast. The reservoir hasn't released water yet, and this floodwater, it's going to devastate these houses in no time. Footage also depicted a group of villagers attempting to wade through the water, but the flooding had already reached knee-deep levels on the road, rendering it impassable. A villager remarked, "We haven't seen flooding like this in decades. Look, the entire road is submerged. We can't get through. What can we do? This is really distressing." Due to the impact of Typhoon Kanan, numerous locations in Heilongjiang province are facing another round of severe flooding. Large groups of residents have once again sought refuge in the mountains for safety. A video depicts villagers, worried about the increasing floodwaters, going to the riverbank to assess the situation, only to unintentionally encounter the authorities' flood discharge efforts. Villagers said, "They've just opened it up. It's quite a coincidence that this happened right as we came." On the 10th, a social media user captured aerial footage from an airplane, revealing vast expanses of Heilongjiang province submerged by floodwaters. Large swaths of fields and villages have been inundated. In addition, a separate individual recorded a video from a train, capturing the widespread flooding that has engulfed both sides of the Heilongjiang Railway. The biggest rice-producing region in China is submerged in floods, leaving farmers with significant losses. According to reports from China National Radio, Wuchang City, Heilongjiang, is a major rice-producing area. At 2:30 a.m. on August 3rd, the Longfengshan Reservoir released floodwaters, causing flooding in several villages downstream, including Wuchang City. People had to be evacuated. Tearfully, a villager named Sun Guoqin looked at her distant home she couldn't return to and said, "We've lost everything, even our roots." A farmer from Wuchang City, Heilongjiang, recorded a video where she tearfully shared her hardships after the disaster. "When I see my house, when I see the land, I feel like I'm falling apart. We grow rice, we cultivate rice paddies, but our home doesn't even have a single grain of rice left." In the video, the farmer's yard is filled with mud, and her modest home is in ruins. Furniture and appliances have been washed away by the floodwaters, leaving her house empty and the scene desolate. Mr. Ma, alias, a resident from Yinji County, told NTD-TV, "The flooding in Heilongjiang is man-made. When the reservoir is dry during normal times, they fear the fish ponds will run out of water. So, they accumulate water, and when heavy rains come, they start releasing water. The water rises rapidly, destroying houses, piling up vehicles, causing a complete crop failure, and resulting in significant losses for the common people. Whether there were severe casualties or not, they won't report it." Expert warns, the CCP will release floods from all sectors onto the Chinese people. Following the discharge of floodwaters from Beijing, which submerged hundreds of villages in Zhuozhou, causing significant casualties and igniting public grievances, Typhoon Kanan is now striking the northeast, causing floods in various areas. Economically, both Evergrande and China Zhongrong Trust have faced defaults. Meanwhile, Western nations are intensifying their containment efforts against the Chinese Communist Party. On August 10, U.S. President Biden announced a ban on American capital investment in Chinese high-tech companies. In this context, on August 12, Chinese writer and independent commentator Kai Shenkuan, ex-Gun 1989, expressed his thoughts on Twitter, stating that the floods occurring across different regions in China are creating a catastrophic scenario. He indicated that this disaster is likely to resemble the tragedy that unfolded in Zhuozhou, significantly affecting the lives of ordinary citizens. He elaborated, some argue that flood discharge areas aren't just defined by geographical factors, they are also influenced by social status. Recent flood discharges in Hebei have indeed shown that the path of floodwaters isn't solely determined by differences in geographic elevation, it's profoundly shaped by the hierarchical distinctions among people who bear the brunt of the disaster. It's important to remind everyone that this flood discharge operation showcases the government's latest crisis management approach. This very approach will have a direct impact on the interests of every individual as we face various impending crises. In this recent flood discharge, the government's approach can be likened to a crude action, like wetting the bed quietly in the middle of the night. The cost, however, is borne by countless individuals in lower positions within the power structure, leading to broken homes and personal tragedies. Facing the financial crisis exemplified by the collapses of companies like Evergrande, Country Garden, and China Zhongji Group, their method of handling is to prevent bankruptcy, to drag the unmanageable bad debts along, freezing the crisis within the financial system. But who shoulders the risk? It's the banks, and ultimately the ordinary depositors who keep their money in these banks. Confronted with the crisis of depleted finances, what we are witnessing now is the central government tightening control over society, stifling the voices seeking help or speaking out. Meanwhile, local governments employ various means to aggressively amass wealth. Who are they collecting from? From those residing in the lower altitudes of the power structure. This is another form of flood discharge. The government is discreetly channeling the financial crisis floodwaters into the low-lying areas of power. Why the current emphasis on anti-corruption within the medical sector? In such a resource-deprived empire, intellectuals and professionals who depend on skills for their livelihoods have long been situated in the lower echelons of power. The floodwaters of the financial crisis, of course, must quietly flow in their direction. Regardless of how you earned your money, no matter how those gray income secrets were once kept hidden, the industry-wide norm dictates that all accumulated wealth needs to be surrendered. The fattened pig must be slaughtered. The original capital of many private enterprises would likely not withstand the scrutiny of a retrospective examination of 30 years. In the early days of reform and opening up, numerous sectors lacked well-defined regulations due to the government's limited capacity. Both governmental and private activities emerged, often justified as bold experimentation and daring innovation. Technically speaking, many of these practices could be considered violations. The commercialization of the medical and educational sectors resulted in the emergence of numerous wealthy individuals. However, this transformation also gave rise to numerous instances of amassing wealth through irregular means, creating a shadowy history of obtaining initial riches. These self-proclaimed middle-class tycoons, who depend on their technical skills for their livelihoods, often view themselves as immune to problems. Many of them remain somewhat detached from official circles, disregarding political risks and firmly believing in the government's various propaganda campaigns. Their assets are largely concentrated within the country, and their life plans are centered around it. Even if they send their children abroad for education, their ultimate goal is to bring them back to China to inherit the family business and follow the well-established path paved by their predecessors. They are the fattened pigs that have been raised for years and are now to be slaughtered. Taking them as examples, those city-dwelling, lower-middle-class individuals who attempt to follow the same path, entering the established career advancement channels through education, exams, and acquiring professional skills during the reform era, hoping for stable incomes, are like small piglets jostling for a spot at the edge of the feeding trough. The floodwaters are quietly rising. The financial crisis that the government is confronting is discreetly evolving into a wave of property rights risks that extends across the entire nation. The property rights of average wage earners are now under threat. Indeed, the issue of wage arrears has been a recurrent problem for quite some time. Currently, the property rights of regular citizens to withdraw their savings from banks are also at risk. This risk has reached an acute point, especially in rural banks in Henan. Furthermore, it's quite probable that in the future, this risk will expand to include China's state-owned Big Four banks, manifesting as widespread restrictions on withdrawal amounts. Floodwaters spare no one. As they surge in, engulfing all the lower areas, the only viable option is to seek higher ground to avoid catastrophe. In a covert manner, the government is reshaping its own financial crisis, the immense debt burden accumulated over time, into a flood that submerges the property rights of everyday people. Kaishenkuan concluded, this concealed deluge has already engulfed your rights to property in a murky mess formed by acts of privilege-driven injustice. Moving ahead, if we wish to maintain a way of life akin to how it was before this inundation, what will be put to the test is your capacity to navigate this perplexing situation, your aptitude to ascend to relatively higher positions of influence. In a scenario where your salary is no longer truly yours, your savings lack genuine ownership, your household's uncertain ownership, and your amassed wealth isn't genuinely under your control, when every straightforward truth requires extra effort to be validated, safeguarding even the most fundamental and commonplace property rights will emerge as the central theme of your existence. The Chinese government helpless amid economic decline, the immobile money printing machine. China's economic data continues to disappoint. According to a report from the central bank, China's new bank loans in July were significantly lower than external expectations, falling even below half of what many experts had predicted. To stimulate the economy, the People's Bank of China had already lowered benchmark interest rates by 10 basis points in June, marking the first such move in the past 10 months. Many industry insiders estimate that the central bank might undertake a few more minor rate cuts this year, although it might not have a significant impact, insufficient to allay concerns of consumers and businesses, and encourage them to borrow. On August 12, financial analyst Lao Man analyzed on Twitter that based on the report of July's social financing increment, from 2017 to 2022, the increment data for July had consistently been around 1 trillion yuan. Public expectations were also around 1 trillion yuan, but this year it plummeted to 528.2 billion yuan, catching the entire financial sector off guard. The financial freeze, where money is inaccessible for borrowing, is referred to as the motionless money printing machine. Lao Man points out that China's economy is facing systemic issues: real estate company debt defaults, local government investment project debt defaults, banks and fund trust industries in unbearable distress, drastic reduction in local government revenues, significant declines in both marriage and birth rates over the past 6 years, sharp decrease in consumer spending power, severe contraction in the durable consumer goods market, soaring prices of essential goods, leading to a state of stagflation. Furthermore, China's foreign relations have severely deteriorated, with exports being obstructed, foreign investment facing hurdles, and domestic and overseas capital accelerating their flight. Chinese borrowers have disappeared, and the People's Bank of China's RMB issuance mechanism anchored by debt has malfunctioned, rendering the printing press immobile. The only path left is that of printing money out of thin air, money without anchor. Means that the money is being generated seemingly from nowhere, without any underlying value or asset supporting its creation. Lao Man expresses that the government is at a loss to address these predicaments and resorting to slogans for market rescue, but such attempts have been transparently seen through by the public. In recent times, the Chinese authorities have been convening frequent meetings and issuing documents to encourage the expansion of private enterprises. However, Chinese entrepreneurs privately mockingly say that only a fool would believe the Chinese Communist Party's words. Expert: China's Great Recession has arrived. With a series of lackluster economic data that paints a grim economic outlook for China, July witnessed a decline of 14.5% in China's foreign trade exports, marking the fastest drop since the outbreak of the pandemic in 2020. Imports also experienced a more significant decline, indicating weakened domestic demand. Consumer Price Index (CPI) for July decreased by 0.3% year-on-year, the first negative growth since March 2021. Producer Price Index (PPI) fell by 4.4% on an annual basis, marking the 10th consecutive month of decline. This is also the first instance of China's CPI and PPI falling in tandem since November 2020. Expenditures by private enterprises in investment or hiring have decreased. China's youth unemployment rate has reached a record-breaking 21%, twice that of the UK and 3 times that of the US. George Magnus of Oxford University's China Center stated in an article in The Guardian on August 11 that the information conveyed by these statistics indicates that China is facing more severe problems, and there is a systematic disarray within China's economic and political system. He emphasized that attributing all of this solely to the COVID-19 pandemic would be a serious mistake. Most of the factors affecting China's economy have been present for years, and the fundamental weakness of China's economy along with its heightened authoritarian characteristics are now two sides of the same coin, seemingly irreversible. Professor Xie Tian of the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina told NTD-TV that these dismal economic data suggest a significant economic recession in China, which might persist for quite some time. He pointed out that in previous economic crises, the CCP relied on foreign investment to weather the storm, but this time it's likely to be much harder. In this crisis, Western capital not only won't come to the rescue, they are now seeing the prospect of China's economic collapse and are actually withdrawing. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.